Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of Sentinels from the Ashes, written by Alex Paknadel and art by Justin Mason. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now the mutant nation of Krakoa has fallen and its people are forced to reintegrate into society. The safe haven of Xavier's school of gifted youngsters has been transformed into a prison, so with human-mutant relations on the brink of devastation, who will protect the fragile peace? So with that said, this issue opens with a man by the name Bradley, aka Lockstep, from the Sentinel fire team, and he is calling in to report that they are currently over the drop zone and ready to do what needs to be done. So with the team on standby, the head of operations, Trask, reminds them that they have 15 minutes to accomplish their goals. And on top of that, a Cosmos recon satellite is about to pass over them. So with the mission a go, we see the new Sentinels standing ready, as the cockpit of their craft started to open, and once the door was open, the team switched to radio silence and prepared to jump out of the lobotomized Mark IV Sentinel to capture a mutant with more kills than cholera. So with the door open, we then see all 4 members of this new team descend to the Earth. And on this team, we see Sergeant Bradley, aka Lockstep, Corporal Rivera, aka Sawtooth, Specialist Teodorescu, aka Voivod, and finally Specialist Babino, aka Shellback. Now with the team introduced, we discovered the area of operation in which they needed to accomplish their goals was located in Russia, and like a meteor crashing into the ground, the team landed with a thud. And upon landing, we learned that Voivod Augments was still a little buggy, so Lockstep ordered him to stay close to Sawtooth until they returned back to the prison to get him a much-needed tune-up. So as the team moved through the streets, Sawtooth brought up how the town was completely empty, to which Lockstep replied by saying it wasn't yesterday, and then Lockstep went on to call Shellback to the front of the formation, for they needed his thermal vision to take point on their advancement. So as they scanned the town, Voivod pointed out that Shellback is extremely weird, for their command pumped him full of mood regulators the night before their current operation. So because he was so drugged up, Shellback is seen as nothing more than a liability against a target like this. Because if it was up to them, they wouldn't go up against this target with anything less than a battalion. So as the 2 soldiers talked amongst themselves, deep within the snow, 2 tentacles slithered up behind them. So as things was about to go bad, we jumped back over to Lockstep and Shellback making their way past the church, when Shellback picked up a faint signature coming from the building. And once he told Lockstep what he picked up, he was then ordered to check it out, so like a good soldier he did as he was told. And once he opened the door, Shellback witnessed a scene right out of a horror movie that explained what happened to the villagers. In fact, it was so bad that Shellback couldn't decide just how many people were in there, and just like the others, a pair of tentacles emerged behind him ready to attack. And with blinding speed, it did just that, as the unknown attackers drove one tentacle through his shoulder and the other around his neck and picked him up off the ground, for Omega Red was here to do some damage. Now with Shellback acting as a human shield, an angered Voivod attempted to take the shot, but for the life of him, he couldn't get a clear opening. So with tensions high and the ball in Omega Red's court, Lockstep took a risk and removed his Sentinel armor and used the nanotech to activate a rundown vehicle. And with no hesitation, he rammed it directly into Omega Red, effectively separating Shellback from his captive. Now with a small opening available, Lockstep started to bark out orders and told Sawtooth to bulk up now while Voivod laid down support fire to kill not tickle. So with the orders out there, I got to say I like the way Sawtooth abilities work, because all she had to do was touch a bit of tech, and just like that, the material of said truck transmitted itself and became a Hulkbuster type armor. And by the looks of it, it packed a punch similar to it as well, for she hit Omega right in the face. But like the machine of war he is, Omega just reset his jaw and was back in the fight, like nothing ever happened. So, with chaos breaking out, Shellback just started to break down and call for help as the remaining members of his team did what they could in order to fight back. Lockstep yelled out for Sawtooth to keep Omega distracted while he recollected his armor from the truck that was used as a ram earlier in the comic. But no matter what they did, the battle was just too overwhelming, so in order to take down a creature like Omega, something dramatic had to be done. So Voivod jumped on Omega's back and told everyone to fall back as he directed all his energy to his arms. On the next page, a giant explosion went off and created a massive crater in the ground, effectively ending this operation. Following that wind, Sawtooth informed her comrade, Voivod, that he needs to stop blowing himself up, or else he may not walk away from it one day. So with 2 of the 4 confirmed as good, we then see Lockstep catching up with Shellback, just to see him completely out of it, repeating 0s and 1s. Now, this was a big deal, because with Shellback out of it, Lockstep tried his best to shake him out of it, but he was too far gone. So like a good soldier, he reported into the prison that Shellback had full-on panicked. And according to the higher-ups, there is only one thing left to do for a person in this condition, and that was something that Lockstep didn't want to do again. But just because Lockstep didn't want to do it, didn't mean Voivod wasn't. So with Shellback put down, Voivod walked away like nothing even happened. Now following that operation coming to an end, we then jump over to Corina's talking with Trask, and during their conversation, Corina brings up how this would be much easier with real Sentinels. To which Trask responds by asking if she really wants to have another batch of genocidal murderbots running around again. And shocking enough, Corina responded by saying absolutely, just as long as they were under her control. Now with that said, Trask went on to say if she was using the original platform, then the Sentinels would be bringing her back corpses instead of prisoners. And as for the issue of grafting, that is an issue with emotional regulation that could be corrected with the right chemicals in the right quantities. Now this wasn't good enough for Corina, because she went on to say that her people would have had it fixed months ago if he's designed to share his nanotech with them. But regardless, she was promised a free hand in running this facility. And now Trask is selecting targets without her authorization, which is a big no-no in her eyes. So to defend his actions, Trask went on to say the board instructed her to extend every courtesy to him and his team, and he expected her to honor it. Now following that remark, Corina proceeded to exit the room while saying she was sorry he couldn't find a place in this world after Xavier brought him back, but Corina then went on to promise him that he would regret it if he tried to usurp what was hers. So with that said, we then jumped over to the next page, with Sawtooth, Lockstep, and Voivod receiving an increased dose of their medication to better fight against the effects of grafting. And by the looks of it, this is a normal occurrence for the fire team after working in theater. And during this interlude, Voivod tried to talk to Lockstep, but the sergeant wasn't trying to hear it. Better yet, he didn't even want him to look in his direction. But in Voivod's defense, it was protocol to put the grafted down. And then Voivod went on to say, beside that was what Shellback wanted him to do. In fact, Voivod went on to say that Shellback made him promise to do the deed if that was ever to happen to him, because he didn't want to live as a robot in his final days. So following that deep conversation, out of nowhere a new person walked up and asked if she was good right where she was. Now this threw everyone off, because according to this newcomer, she was their new gunny that was meant to replace Shellback just moments after his death. Now this right here was out of pocket, because it wasn't even a full 24 hours after they just lost a comrade. So with rage in Lockstep's heart, he stormed out of his seat and went directly toward Trask to have a private conversation. So speaking of Trask, on the next page, we see the man himself thinking about the time when Professor X resurrected him during the era of Krakoa. But before we could get too deep into it, Lockstep opened his office door and entered, which sparked Trask to say he was about to catch a flight, so what can he help him with? To which Lockstep replied by saying, where did he find the new recruit? To which Trask answered by saying a VA hospital just like himself. And the way she got there was a symbiote dragon bit her chopper in half during the battle with Null. So with that explained, Lockstep went on to say that this team was under his control, so he needed to be consulted before he brought in new personnel. Now with that outburst, Trask shot back by saying the team is absolutely his to command, but its composition is for him to decide. So just as Trask was about to leave the room, Lockstep asked another question, and asked if Trask told her what his nanotech was going to do to her before she signed the consent form. So with that out there, the way Trask answered the question was very creative, because he went on to tell a story about how in 1281 King Edward ordered the extermination of every last wolf in England, but there was one forest in the Northumberland that positively teemed with them. So of course, the slaughter took months, and eventually, the wolves were gone. And after their success, we then witnessed 2 villages on either side of the Howling Acres who was finally able to communicate with each other after decades. And shortly after the bodies started to fall, for in the wolves' absence, an ancient blood feud between the 2 villages, its cause long forgotten, had been reawakened. For those wolves had actually been protecting them from each other. So fast forward to more recent times, Bolivar Trask designed the original Sentinels for one purpose, mutant extermination. Now the old fool mistook mutants for wolves, even when his own son's mutation became apparent. Until recently, mutantkind was simply a village on the other side of a dark forest. So what Trask was trying to say was that his village was an island and the forest was an ocean, but see, that is all over now since the fall of Krakoa. And without wolves to frighten everyone back into their beds, the two species are going to try to slaughter each other. So ultimately the world needs wolves, the Sentinels, now more than ever, and with that said, Trask exited the room and left Lockstep to contemplate everything he said. Now following that rundown, we then follow Lockstep back to his chamber, where he is working out while talking with his AI assistant. And during their conversation, the assistant is trying to convince him to take his injections due to him missing them 4 hours ago. So with the attempt going nowhere, Lockstep asked his assistant to find a certain someone for him, his son Kevin Anthony Hansen, who should be 14 years old and lives in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And after a brief search, all trails ran up cold and left Lockstep alone and depressed. So with that day coming to an end, on the next page we see a board meeting with the chair members meeting with Trask. And they start their meeting by thanking him for flying out and under short notice, because they had been told that Trask had activated another asset without the prison board's authorization. To which Trask replied by saying, with respect, the board's bureaucracy can be cumbersome and slow-moving. So he rather activate a new asset and apologize later than send his fire team in short-handed. Now this was not what the board wanted to hear, because one of the members said that Trask's team is considered contractors, so in the end, they call the shots. Now this pissed Trask off, because he went on to say this was absurd, for this company was built by his father, and he is a major investor in the prison. Now to that, another member went on to shoot back by saying that doesn't make it his private fiefdom. In fact, she then went on to say Dr. Ellis says he is running his program with no oversight of any kind. So because of that, the board has determined to shut down his operations effective immediately. Now following that news drop, we then jump over to the prison, where Sawtooth and the new person is escorting Omega Red to his cell, and as they walk, the new person isn't too comfortable with what she was witnessing down below. In fact, Sawtooth had to remind her that their job was a simple snatch and grab outfit, so whatever happened after they dropped them off was none of their business. So as they continued to walk, the new girl could hear mutants undergoing horrible experimenting. So once they got to Omega's cell, Sawtooth informed the new person that 6 months ago she was on a breathing machine, and now she is up and moving, and all she has to do is take her mood regulators, keep her mouth shut, and do her job, and everything would be fine. So right as they was about to drop him off, a door from the hallway blew open as we discovered the prisoner that was worked on was none other than Blob. So with Blob free, we then transitioned back to the meeting, and once there, Trask holds up his necklace and states that he is a mutant and they shouldn't forget that, because his ability is to see thousands of potential futures at once. So, when Charles resurrected him on Krakoa, he told him that he deserved a second chance. Now Trask was still slick with Yoke when he started having visions of the mutants who would take them to the brink of extermination. So, that is why he restarted the Sentinel Program. But, see, he also saw other things like tech stocks, oil futures, locations of vibranium and lanthanum deposits, and corporate failures. In short, a precog on the payroll would give them quite the competitive advantage in their field. With that aside, we then jump back to the prison as Sawtooth takes off to confront Blob while leaving the new girl to watch Omega alone. And after a quick break of a few fingers, Omega was free and had the new girl against the wall, and right before he could seal the deal, we hopped back over to the meeting. And once there, the board members quickly retracted their prior statements and agreed to give Trask a little more runway, just as long as he was keeping no more surprises. And just as Trask agreed, he looked at his phone as his latest, off-the-books, experiment was nearing its completion. Now following that, as Sawtooth blasted at Blob, we get Omega Red asking the new girl, did they tell her different? Did they tell her that the caramelized corpses of Genosha were an anomaly? Because if they did, he was there to tell her that was a lie, because it would make no difference. But see, as Omega was talking to the new girl, she was rapidly dropping the temperature around them, and once he realized it, it was too late, for she opened her mouth and let out a massive blast at point-blank range. For the new girl was absorbing the ambient energy in the room so she could redirect it. And after the blast was out, the new girl passed out, only to be reawakened by Sawtooth. And on a side note, I like how Sawtooth compared her attack to Godzilla's breath. So as this issue comes to an end, we see the new girl look on as a vision of Onslaught loomed in the background. Now down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.